Thank you, sir. You are a patriot.
Hey, everybody. All right, so for those who don't know me, I was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. I did 17 years. I was an infantry commander. I've got commendations for valor, Bronze Star, combat action. I went on and got a master's in military science. I've done over a year combat operations in Afghanistan, over 8 months in Iraq. I've done NEO operations in Lebanon, all through Africa. This has been my whole life, the last 2 decades of war. And so I am a reminder in this election, we don't normally vote on foreign policy, but I'm here as a reminder that the foreign policy under the current administration has really weakened the position of the United States military, and our standing in the world. And I got to a place on August 26, 2021, where I made a video where I essentially just pointed out a list of mistakes, and I just want to walk you through that because there's a lot of things that people don't understand, how bad these decisions that were made. And I, even as a 17-year guy who's been doing this, was able to quickly identify it. So I'm just going to walk you through this really quickly, 4 minutes or less. So President Biden took office 2021, and he went to General McKenzie. General McKenzie is the guy that's in charge of what we call CENTCOM, the Combatant Command. He's in charge of Afghanistan. President Biden says, I want to go from 2,500 troops down to 650 troops. Right at that moment, General McKenzie had the opportunity to say, that's not a good idea. The Taliban has what we call a spring fighting season because they go into the mountains of Taliban. We can easily conduct the withdrawal in the months of October to February, be completely uncontested. But we picked an arbitrary date of September 11th because the PR date of the 20-year September 11th was more important than American lives, American treasure. General McKenzie can't convince President Biden of this, and then General McKenzie doesn't resign. So in my opinion, at that point, General McKenzie is responsible for the plan. He later goes on and says he wasn't responsible because he advised against it, which I think we're at a place now where even our senior leaders can't hold themselves accountable. So then we go on, 3 months go by. So concurrently, General McKenzie is planning this withdrawal. He assigns a one-star general, General Sullivan, to plan with the State Department in DC for a be prepared to evacuation, separate mission, right? These evacuation planners plan on using Bagram Air Base because Bagram Air Base was the key piece of training we needed to conduct an evacuation. A lot of people talk about President Trump's plan and the Doha and how Biden was restrained by President Trump. Well, if you actually read President Trump's plan, the final base we were going to use was Bagram Air Base because it just made sense. So then at the end of June, General McKenzie, this has never come out in congressional testimony, so I don't know if Biden ordered him or General McKenzie unilaterally made this decision, but he said, we're going to leave Bagram Air Base. And then in the middle of the night, weirdly, we leave Bagram Air Base. When we do, we leave 7,000 prisoners in the prison. All right, 7,000 prisoners is more than our entire force that later responded. That's not even counting the force of the Taliban. So the Taliban walks up in July, they release the 7,000 prisoners. Now their force is 10, 15,000 people strong. And then they walk up to Kabul. Now it's August. General McKenzie realizes a day late, $1 short, that this is going badly. And he throws 5,000 troops at the problem. So we went from 2,500, 650, back up to 5,000. So everyone's seen the videos of all the Afghanis holding onto the airplanes. What they don't really understand is what happened before that. On August 15th, that's right when the Marines showed up at the H-Kaya airfield. They showed up at the exact same time the Taliban showed up, and multiple firefights ensued. This is public record. It's in the military investigation. We killed multiple Taliban fighters. What the Taliban was using was all of those bystanders, all those local Afghanis as human shields and pushing them into the Marines. That's why the people freaked out. That's why they ran across the airfield to hang on to the airplanes. So then General McKenzie essentially negotiates our surrender, and then that night he tells the Marines that they have to use the Taliban, who they were just firing at, as their external security. I mean, I can't think of a more disgraceful way to do that. Obviously, the Taliban lets a suicide bomber through the checkpoint. They kill 13 service members, wound others, kill hundreds of civilians. And in response, we conduct a drone strike where we kill nothing but women and children. And then General Milley called it a righteous strike. It wasn't until a New York Times reporter on the ground uncovered that they were lying, that they had to come clean with that. And then they stand in front of the American people and talk about what an overwhelming non-combatant evacuation success it was. It wasn't until 2 years later, about a year ago, that General McKenzie, after he retired honorably and got his whole wing at University of Central Florida built for him, that he came out and said of the terrible mistakes that were made. And so there I was, a lieutenant colonel. You can see all these decisions as they're being made real time. And I essentially just made a video that said, hey, I don't understand why you didn't throw your rank on the table and not evacuate Bagram Air Base. And I think we as service members who have fought for the last 2 decades, all of our sacrifices, we deserve a senior leader to assume accountability. Well, it got real weird for me after that. I did it in uniform. I did it very intentionally to bring awareness to the situation. But I was fired immediately the next day. Still didn't know if I was pending legal action. And then I realized that the divide was probably too deep. So I submitted my resignation. And when I did that, they sent me to a mental health hospital to try to have me admitted by calling me crazy. And when you attack someone's mental health, it's weird because you're like, I'm not crazy. And they're like, that's what a crazy person would say. And then you have this like weird banter back and forth. Ultimately, I got the doctor to not admit me, but I was going through this information war. If anyone listened to General Flynn last night, we were talking about they don't necessarily assassinate you, but they just try to assassinate your character. I mean, there was one time where I was talking to my command, and then the Marine Corps PR released a statement that, hey, we're aware of Lieutenant Colonel Scheller. We're trying to locate him and make sure he's not a threat to himself or to his family. When I was like talking to my command in complete communication, so I just felt like I was fighting a war in the media. And ultimately, they gave me a gag order. I violated that gag order and was put in solitary confinement. And so, I came out on the other side. This whole process didn't go quickly. It was like 6 months until I could resign. I ended up getting shuffled out of the Marine Corps 3 years short of my retirement. And, went on. I didn't do a single interview during that process. Once I got out, I hit all the shows. I was on Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Megyn Kelly, PBD, Jocko's podcast, all the shows that tell my story, and then I went on a book tour. So this is all kind of transpired over the last 3 years. And, when I was in it, this for me was supposed to be very apolitical. I thought senior military leaders being held accountable should be like one of the last political things we agreed upon. When I made my first video, I didn't even use President Biden's name or the president. I was talking about my senior military leaders. But when you jump into the arena, once I made like my second statement, like my face was like if you typed in foxnews.com, it was like the banner story of the day, if you will. Once you get to that level, it just becomes hyper political. And every headline to me was President Biden's, or Lieutenant Colonel Scheller criticizes President Biden's botched Afghanistan withdrawal. When the truth was, it was mostly President Biden and Vice President Harris, who sit on the National Security Council, their decisions. But at the end of the day, we also have senior military leaders that are just devoid of any ability to push back. I mean, the United States military has $1 trillion annual budget. They have the best young talent, and they have the best training resources in the military. Why do we consistently fail wars? It's because we have senior leaders that are afraid to tell the truth. And if they do tell the truth, their career ends. And so, we talk about cleaning house, draining the swamp, but I'm very hesitant to say. I mean, you could go through and fire a bunch of senior military leaders, which absolutely needs to happen. But until we can fix the system, you're going to continue to have system produce weak leadership, which is what we have in the military right now. And so I'm very hopeful that President Trump wins this election. I'm very hopeful that he changes course in the military. Listening to General Flynn yesterday was very encouraging. But I'll just remind you, the United States' greatness is often hinged upon our ability to project power. And that can be economic, it can be militarily, it can be information, or it can be diplomatic. Right? Those are really how you gauge the four sources of national power. And maybe I'm biased, but I think all things come back to the military. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a bad place. And I think the military is ready for strong leadership. We need a strong Secretary of Defense. I'll be honest, I was really excited when Mattis became Secretary of Defense, and he was a failure. He was an abysmal failure, and the truth is, as a Marine, General Mattis never won anything. You see all these generals that are supporting Harris, McChrystal, Petraeus. These guys didn't win a single war, and they're products of a system that needs change bad. So That's what I'm here to talk about. I have a table right outside there. I am selling my book and my t-shirt if you have questions. I do a lot of speaking. I do questions and answers. So if you want to come over and talk to me, I'd be happy to talk to you. But thank you for having me.